Hi, everyone, and then welcome to you wherever you happen to be. We're really glad that you're joining us here on Unstoppable Mindset. I'm your host, Mike Hingson, or you can call me Michael. I don't really care which, but we're glad that you're with us wherever you are, and we appreciate you tuning in today. Tuning in, that's an old word from radio and some television, but more radio than television. But I actually heard someone today use the term "don't touch that dial." So there you go. But radio is radio, and podcasts are podcast. Anyway, we're glad you're here. Now that I got that out of the system, but I'm glad that we have a chance to be here with you today. And today our guest is Holly Gutwillinger. Gutwillinger. I want to make sure I do it right. And Holly is an author, and she's got a lot of other endeavors that she's done over the years and is going to continue to do. So I'm really looking forward to hearing all that she's got to say. And we're going to get right to it. So, Holly, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Michael. I like that saying, tuning in. And in fact, I went to a bookstore just the other day, and she had what looked to be an old transistor radio, but I know it was probably just a newer speaker that was made to look like a radio.
I still have an old transistor radio. I haven't used it a lot lately, but I have it, and it has a dial you can turn to for volume, and another dial for tuning in different stations, and a button to go from AM to FM. So there you are.
Yeah. I have many of them. Like I should say, not have, but yes, very familiar with them.
I collect as a hobby old radio shows, and so I do a lot of things with radio, and it's a lot of fun to do things. I collect a lot of different kinds of shows, and there's a show, I think it's Blondie and Dagwood, the comic strip, and theirs always starts, don't touch that dial. So there you are. But old radio is fun, and it's interesting to listen to history from the perspective of what happened on a lot of those radio shows, especially in the time of war, like World War II, just how radio helped pull so many people together. It was pretty fascinating.
I agree.
I wish we had more of that today, but that's the way it is. Well, why don't we start, as I love to do, tell us kind of about the early Holly growing up and all that stuff. And I know that you live in Canada. You're in what, Northern Toronto?
Northern Ontario.
Northern Ontario, rather, not Toronto. Northern Toronto isn't very far.
So you weren't very far.
But anyway, Northern Ontario. Well, anyway, so tell us about kind of the early Holly.
Goodness, early Holly.
Just a long time ago in a galaxy.
Long time ago. Early Holly loved to be, she's just a younger version of who she is now. And she loved to do so many things. I remember going, collecting wood with my father in the forest. That's what we did every weekend to collect for the winter. Just spending so much time outside creating. And what I realized in the last week or so, I had one of those aha moments. Somebody asked me if I always loved to write. And I said, well, not that I can recall, but now that I think about it, I was always a storyteller. And some of those memories are coming back to me, where I used to create screenplays almost in the basement. I'd have restaurants and school classrooms. But I did spend a lot of my time outside with my father, and he built old cars, so street rods. And we would go hunting for old car skeletons in the back bush. So that's a lot of what younger Holly's life was like. And then, of course, school and high school. And I was always creative. But yeah, a lot of the same.
Why do you think that is, that you were always creative and always writing and doing other kind of innovative things like that? Do you have any notion as to why? Were you encouraged to do that, or?
I was not, but I love that question, Mike, because now you're making me think again. I'm going in and mining for those old memories, but I think it's because my siblings were much older than me. And so by the time I was 7, they were gone. And then it was just me. So, I live in rural Northern Ontario. There weren't a lot of kids in the neighborhood. So a lot of my time was spent alone. And I think that I just needed to entertain myself. And I did. So I think that's one of the reasons why I became so creative because I just kind of kept myself company.
Kept yourself company and you kept busy. Well,
Yes.
what did your parents think of all of that?
I don't know. I come from a time when, kids were sort of to the side and
Hmm.
quiet. My father was like in the garage building his cars, and if he wasn't building cars, he was mining. My mother was working, and they had already had two children, and I was a unexpected surprise, I suppose. So
Hmm.
I don't really know what they thought about that, but my mother's still here, so maybe I'll have to ask her that question.
I'll have to ask her. What kind of work did she do?
She worked at like a retail store here called Canadian Tire, which
Hmm.
is, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I don't know
Mm-mm.
what your equivalent would be. Kind of like a Home Depot, but more centered towards cars.
Cars, yeah.
Yeah, which my father loved because he got parts at a discount.
I was just going to ask, did that relationship and that employment benefit his car
Oh, yes.
fix?
Oh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, definitely.
And
Yeah.
what's happened to all the cars over the years?
Well, my father built so many cars. I remember every week a new car rolling into the driveway, whether he was fixing it or selling one and buying another, building for another person. Over the span of about 13 years, he built a 1934 Ford three-window coupe from the frame up. And my sister has it now in her barn. And he
Mm,
also gifted her like a 52 Ford pickup. So she has both of those because she has the space. And she has a husband who's able to keep them running, which is important.
yeah.
So yeah, the cars came and they went.
Well,
Couldn't be
so
attached to vehicles too much around here.
yeah. Well, a lot of fascination with cars and hot rods and all that sort of stuff. So I understand. The DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles here, won't let me get a driver's license. And as I point out to people, given the way most people drive around here, I don't see why I shouldn't be able to get a license just as well as anybody else because I don't think that they're watching what they're doing anyway. So
Agreed. I think we can all
anyway,
agree on that.
so you went through high school. Did you go to college or university?
I did. I went to college. I was that kid that was supposed to go to university, but I just didn't have the money, nor did my parents. And so I did go to college, but I got a job right out of while I was in college, actually. Got a full-time job, and they allowed me to finish my schoolwork at home. And I started working at 19 and never stopped. But I did go back to school in 2018 and got my
Mm.
degree and kept pushing. So there I was with my own two sons in university, and I was in university. So it was an expensive time.
So what is the difference between college and university in Canada?
So college, you will receive a diploma and it's more hands-on. Whereas university is very theoretical and academic. So not as much hands-on. And so you'll get
Mm,
like a Bachelor of Arts, 3 or 4
right.
year Bachelor of Arts and lots of essays. But college, you do a lot of hands-on. So skills.
More skills and technical things.
Yes. Yes.
So what was this job that you got at the age of 19?
It was for a chartered accountant's office, and I was the receptionist. And that's right when computers were coming in. So it was a very
Mm.
interesting time. And I worked there for 10 years and they became my family. But then we moved north, my husband and I. So I had to leave that work family and move on to a very remote town in northern Manitoba. And I just took on jobs. I just sort of incrementally got different jobs that were just a little bit, a step up in higher pay in a sense, and just kept building on those skills.
And while that was going on, were you showing creativity in any way, or did you kind of have to put that by the wayside for a while?
I was always dabbling at home. So I would work during the day, do my job, and then when I returned home, I was always creating something. It could be knitting, scrapbooking, letter writing, you name it, I've tried it. And it was just how I spent my time. And yeah, there wasn't much to do up north. So it was important for me to have that outlet somehow.
Well, But I guess you would say definitely though that it kept you busy, which is kind of one of the things that you wanted to do.
Absolutely. And it also is a conversation starter. It doesn't matter if it's a small town or a big town, but if you can find that link with someone, it's a way to make connections with people, friendships. And I found that it came in handy, that the smaller towns tend to have a lot of groups or meetings of sorts where creatives come together, whether they're knitting circles or crafting circles. And so that was an important part of my life because it was very difficult for me to be away from my family.
Mm.
Hmm.
So as you think about it, tell me a story of one time that being involved in that and going that route really helped you as you moved forward.
That's a good question. So I can remember a time when I lived in Yellowknife, which is in the Northwest Territories. So further up north, we moved up there after northern Manitoba. And it was an even smaller place, but I had found a group of women who made cards, like greeting cards. And so every month, and I can't quite remember how I got myself into this group, but I suppose I'm known for, popping in and saying, "Hi, I'm Holly. Nice to meet you," and try to get myself involved. But every month we'd go to a different person's house and we'd make these greeting cards and then we'd share them. So you'd make 12 of the same kind and then you'd share them with the other people that were there and we'd have snacks and it just created community. And that was very important in a isolated northern community such as that one.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So the sense of community was, and I gather, needless to say, is still very relevant to you. Did you keep in touch fairly well with your family, with your parents, and all that, or?
As much as you could, because that was at the dawn of Facebook time.
Mm,
So it was old school rotary phones landlines, and we would call every week. But really, that was one of the only ways that we communicated. And so
mm,
that was probably the most difficult part was being away from my family and
mm,
having my two children be away from their grandparents for so
yeah.
long.
What was the reason that you moved well up to northern Manitoba and then up into Yellowknife?
Because I had a husband who was in mining. And so
Ah,
we made the decision. It was a great opportunity for a young family to find work there. Well, not find, the job came to him. And so we moved there and made a life for ourselves there. And then we saw an opportunity to return back to Northern Ontario, which is where we're from, so that we could help our parents as they were going through health issues
hmm.
and have our kids have the opportunity to know their grandparents as well.
Well, and there's a lot of merit to that, needless to say.
Yeah.
But through all of that, were you always a writer? Did you always write things? And have you kept a lot of your early writings if that were the case?
I wasn't a writer of stories as much as I was of notes and love letters. I used to love having a pen pal. Um, and I don't have journals or anything like that, but what I have found are all the cards that I used to make for
Mm,
my parents. And I'm grateful that they did keep that because I don't know, it takes me down memory lane and I can see where it all began. I have memories of sitting behind the wingback chair in the living room and creating out of paper towel rolls or whatever supplies I could find around the house. But those cards really mean a lot to me because it's still who I am and I do enjoy writing someone a letter or a note. Yeah.
yeah. Do you find that sometimes the creativity just seems to shut down or it isn't coming through? And if that's the case, how do you deal with that?
Hmm. I Creativity is not something that has shut down for me. Now, that being said, I have shut it down. When I am not successful at something, when you get frustrated and you're trying to learn something, but you can't quite get it, I'll be the one to break off with the with the hobby at hand. So let's take crochet, for example. If I just couldn't get that one stitch, I would get frustrated and I'd put it to the side and I'd move on to something else. But I feel like I've evolved when it comes to that aspect of my life. I persevere a lot more now, and I'm not filling my life with as many creative mediums. I'm really trying to focus on the ones that give me meaning, such as writing.
Well, when you put something aside just because it wasn't working out, did you ever find that you went back to it and had success, or did you not?
I did, yes. Yeah, after some time. Now, that was if I didn't throw everything out in the process, because I've been known to do that when you get frustrated and you're just like, oh, you shake your head and you give everything away because, like, I'm never doing that again. And so I have done that on a few occasions, but not in the last few years. And yes, I have returned to knitting, for example. Color work was something that I struggled with. But I went back to it. And I think that sometimes it's about being in the right moment for whatever that may be. Maybe it's a book you're reading, maybe it's a movie you're watching, or maybe it's something you're working on. And now I have no issues with color work. So I found the rhythm that I needed to get through it.
How do you find that technology, as we advance with that, is affecting your creativity and the different things that you do?
Good question. As far as hobbies go, I think that digital is helpful because I'm able to access more living here in a place where I may not be able to access supplies or patterns. But I don't find that, like the computer world has affected much else in my life. I'm able to navigate it. That being said, I think that keeping up with social media is a time stealer.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we all feel we need to do it. I know I put pressure on myself for that. And I'm not even really sure how much that advances anything. I suppose I need to do my own study on my own social media, but as far as it goes, that I think it's a time thief.
Yeah. Well, I think there's merit to that. I think it is a time stealer in a lot of ways, and I think that it is leading us down some paths that probably are really better left alone. We're too sensitive to social media. We're just too heavily involved with it,
Mhm.
and it's taking us away from a lot of personal and interpersonal reactions and involvement with other people, which is too bad. I've heard about families driving somewhere and the kids are in the back seat of the car texting back and forth.
Yes.
Um, in the car,
Yeah.
they don't talk to each other.
Mhm.
And I heard one of the reasons I asked somebody once, why is that? And they said, well, they also don't want their parents to hear what they're talking about. But
Mhm.
still,
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
Or being in a restaurant and seeing a family at a table, but the kids are on the phones or on an iPad watching a movie, and I'm thinking, shouldn't you be taking these moments to talk to one another? The phones were never allowed at my dinner table. That's the one thing, and it sticks to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and it's not just the kids. Oftentimes, parents are doing it.
that's right.
Now, I personally think that like a smartphone is a good tool, but I don't focus on it all day. I don't do that and won't because I don't think it's necessary and it's not adding a lot of value to my life to do that. If there's a game that I want to play, I can play that game, but I don't spend all day on the phone.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, like especially when I'm doing a podcast like this, it all gets silenced so that we don't get interrupted because the last thing I want is for something to interrupt what we're doing. But
Mhm.
it's not just doing a podcast. I think it's important that we all take more time to be involved with others around us directly.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with that, Michael.
That's my opinion, but I think
Well,
that it's
everybody has an
important.
opinion.
Yeah, that's okay. And there will be people who disagree with that, and that's fine. We'll see how it all works.
Yeah.
But so but you do a lot of ideas and create and so on. How do you channel your ideas?
Well, I channel them through walking and through running, and driving is one of the greatest funnels that I have. So yesterday I was on a 7 hour drive and I absolutely love it because I listen to podcasts, audiobooks, and then I just drive in silence. If an idea is coming through, I'll just drive in silence and let the thoughts swirl, and I get to sort of sit with them. And sometimes I've even pulled over and made notes or recorded my thoughts so that I don't lose them.
Mm-hmm.
But, channeling them through things that I read, conversations, podcasts, I find are a huge gift when it comes to creating, because it could be a conversation someone is having, and they'll just say that one word that triggers something in your thoughts that, unleashes something new for you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in podcasts, and there's so many of them. It has definitely been a very successful thing. It's one of the things that Apple has done that has changed um, a lot of what we are and what we do in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
if it's a way for people to be able to get out and interact, that's great. It still is, though, you're typically listening to someone, um, unless you get involved in the podcast or doing your own podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I've always enjoyed podcasts, although I haven't been listening to them right from the beginning, but for several years, for sure. And I love that there's such a variety now. There's something for everyone, whether it's a
Mhm.
story you want to listen to, or meditation, or having a great conversation. I've even learned so much about the craft of writing through podcasts.
Have you ever thought of doing your own podcast?
I have, and I've recently started one with my son. We started back in November, and it's going very well, and we're having a lot of fun.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's called Ramblings from the Little Shed because I'm sitting here in the back of my garage, but I call it my shed, and it's a room on its own, and it's surrounded in cedar planks or pine. My apologies, pine planks, and I have the wood stove beside me. So that's why we ramble from the little shed. And my son is in Toronto, so we connect over video, and we have conversations with creative individuals about their pets and their animals. So first we talk about how they believe their animals or their pets influence their creativity. And then we shift over to who they are as creatives. But it's just conversational. And then my son and I, once the guest has left, we ramble on about things during the week and our favorite things. And yeah, we wear
Yes.
flannel shirts and drink warm coffee.
There you go. What prompted you to focus on having the discussions around animals?
Definitely because my book is solely focused on my two dogs. And I thought, if my dog can have so much influence on my creativity, and I thank him for the gift of giving me the story, then I believe that other people do as well. There's been such a shift in the way that people value their pets or treat them. And I feel that there's more, right? And people love talking about their pets. So I thought, wait a minute, there's so many creative people out there. Surely they want to talk about their pets. And we have met chefs, food photographers, tarot readers, fortune tellers, authors, people of all walks of life. We're having a grand time.
Dogs mainly, or other
No,
animals as well?
other animals as well. In fact, I just met a woman, a mother and daughter, who have an alpaca farm.
Oh,
And they have 36 alpacas in their backyard that they raise, and they shear them, they not draft, what's it called? They card the the wool, and then I'm trying to think of all the terms here that go with what they do. And then they draft it, and then they spin it, And then they knit their garments out of the
Alpaca wool.
alpaca wool. And they have a beautiful storefront. And I'm thinking, my goodness, that is so inspiring, first of all, to start something of that caliber. And so their animals have a direct influence on their creativity. I mean, it goes hand in hand for them. So not just dogs and cats, can be any kind of animal.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm limited here. We just have a dog. Well, not just, but I have my guide dog Alamo and a cat Stitch, and
I
they
love
keep
it.
me company since my wife has passed. So they keep me company
Yeah.
and smush up against. Well, Stitch the cat smushes up against me when we sleep at night, and she likes that. So I
Hmm.
make sure that I don't roll over on her or anything like that. And Alamo sleeps on his own bed right by ours. So it works out well, and everybody seems to be pretty happy here. So that's a good thing.
Well,
But
that's nice.
it's fascinating, and it's amazing how many people have done so many things with regard to animals. Years ago, my wife discovered a website called Craftsy. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes, I have.
Yeah,
I've joined it a few times.
yeah. And when she was looking at Craftsy one time, she found a company in Ohio called Litter One.
Okay.
And Litter One makes cat litter, but they make it out of pine kernels and they put them in a disposable box. So you put the box out, the cat uses it, and for me specifically, we put a box out and it'll last a week, and then we just throw it away and put up another box. And I find that I'm spending about the same amount with litter one that I would if I were just buying cat litter any other way. But
Okay.
it's clearly a lot more well biodegradable, if you will, and Stitch seems to like it, so that's good.
I wonder if that's something I can get up here.
I would check. It's the website is called Litter One. I would bet you can.
I definitely am going to check into that.
Yeah. And like I said, Stitch likes it from the first time we got it, and it for a while every week. Of course, you got the scent of essentially fresh pine kernels, which also helps. But I've got to really talk with them. I'd love to learn sometime the history of how that came to be, because it's just fascinating that they came up with this creative thing, and I wonder why and how that occurred. But there's got to be a story there.
Michael, when I go visit my son in Toronto, we do spend some time at the dog parks just sitting there. My dogs aren't even with me,
Yeah,
just because I find it very calming and fun,
yeah.
and I'm not stressed out about my dog chasing another dog. I just get to sit there and observe. But one thing I've noticed is in these parks, and there like I almost call them bougie parks because they're so fancy and the dogs are so well behaved, but they have wood chips all
Mm-hmm.
over.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder, I've often wondered, like, how do you, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, how do they, does the scent get absorbed, or do they have to rake it all the time? I'm not sure.
Oh, it's raked a fair amount,
Yeah.
and wood chips are replaced as they need to be. I've never been a fan of taking dogs to a dog park. Actually, I've seen some dogs that have been very seriously injured by other
Mhm.
dogs at a dog park and so on,
Yeah.
and I just personally tend not to. But I like the idea of just going and being there. But yeah, I would not want to take my guide dogs there. I want to keep them as healthy as possible. So
Definitely.
their lives are a little bit more sheltered, if you will, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And they
They
seem to
have an
like it.
important job, don't they? Hmm.
Well, they do. It's a team effort, and they're part of it. And it's my job to make sure that they stay healthy and get to be healthy. I was in New Zealand once back in 2003, and I visited the guide dog organization down there. What's
Hmm.
really fascinating is they have a 1 square mile piece of property that is entirely fenced, and the guide dogs can run free. So we
Hmm.
actually, that's when I had my fifth guide dog who was with me in the World Trade Center, Roselle, and we let Roselle run around in there, and she was the only one at the time, but those dogs are really well behaved, and so nobody's really worried about them interacting in a negative way. But this huge 1 square mile piece of property was just fascinating. The dogs can just run and romp and have a good time.
Nice. Yeah. I like the thought of that.
So you guys do the podcast. When did you start it? You said November?
Yep. We started beginning of November with I put out a small trailer because I was trying to, get comfortable with the whole concept and step out of my own fear, I suppose. And having my son there is just such a delight because I love spending time with my sons, of course. And he's quite good at it. And he's got the voice, and he does streaming on his own time. But it's we've been doing it weekly and it's just working. We record, once a week. I don't overburden my schedule. And just having the best time. I do tend to when I fall into conversations with creatives, I may be gathering information to see if they would be, a likely guest. And if I feel like they are, then I'll ask them the question, are you interested in podcasts? And would you like to be a guest? And it's not for everyone. And although no one has said no to this point, but it's, I suppose, not that I handpick people, but I certainly, um, I like to feel a connection with the guest,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
I can appreciate that. It's important to really have a conversation, which is why this podcast is much more conversational than interviewish, because I really want people to relax. And I don't remember whether I mentioned to you, but the one hard and fast rule about being on this podcast is you got to have fun. And
Yes. Yeah, I like that.
yeah, and I've had a couple of people who said, "Well, I can force myself to do that," and of course they're being sarcastic because
Yeah.
everybody appreciates it, and that's the way it should be. It should be fun. It's not intended to be antagonistic or to make life difficult in any way, and having fun is important.
I agree. And it should find joy in the things that you do. And I mean, not everything is joyful and brings happiness, but we should at least strive to find some joy, right?
Well, yeah, we should do that. So, do you have a word for the year?
I do.
Do you have a different word every year?
I do. I've been doing it for a few years because it really does give something more to my life. Like it brings me joy. I mean, that's cheesy, but it really does. I have sticky notes right above my computer, and every now and again I really do sort of spend time looking at those notes and have to come back to the word. So it's something that works for me.
Hmm,
So you ready for my word?
sure.
It's unstoppable.
That's this year, huh?
Yes, that's this year. Yeah,
And
no
and
coincidence.
and why?
Well, I mean, I took on writing this book. I never expected to have a beautiful paperback sitting in front of me, but I did do it. And I thought, I have always strived and pushed myself to do more, to try things, never limit myself. There've been many, many moments of fear, of digging my heels in the sand, but I thought, wow, look what I've accomplished in the last couple of years. And I thought, what else can I do? So I stepped out of the fear with the podcast, and I'm really finding my passion. And so it's not, the word unstoppable is not meant to be arrogant
Mm-hmm.
or, ego-centered. It will continue to drive me forward, especially in those moments when I might falter somewhat and feel whether if I'm questioning something, I just want to remember, I want to come back to, no, remember, you can do this. You're unstoppable. And you are the one who has created this for yourself, no one else. I've had help and I've had guidance, but at the end of the day, I am the creator of everything I've done. So
When I started this podcast back in August of 2001, I was trying to think of a title, a name for it.
mhm.
And I I'd heard Unstoppable a few times, but I didn't hear it nearly as much as I hear it now. And I
Mhm.
heard other words like amazing and other things like that, and resilience that gets so overused. But Unstoppable hadn't quite graduated to that place yet. And so I adopted it, but I also made it Unstoppable Mindset. And I think it's so important because it led me to realize that what I wanted to do was to give anyone who had a story that they wanted to tell.
Mhm.
Sometimes even people were brave enough to come on and say, "Well, I don't think I have an interesting story," but I convinced them to come on the podcast, and we've had great times. But the idea is that in reality, I think everyone on the planet has a story to tell.
I
And I
agree.
think that everyone on the planet has had challenges that they have overcome in their lives. And so, for my purposes and my opinion, is that I want to give people the opportunity to come on and tell their stories and help encourage them to do that. And I think it's been very beneficial for a lot of people to be able to do that. But they do come on and they tell their stories and they talk about things they've done, and they go away realizing, yeah, I'm not really as bad as I thought I was, which is really part of what it's all about. Because I think that the reality is we all totally underrate ourselves anyway.
Hmm. Yes. And in fact, you have taken me down a couple of memory lanes of my own, right? With some of your questions, and I appreciate that because when we're done here, I'll get to reflect on some of those memories that I thought maybe that I had lost, and like a vision appeared in my thoughts, and it's like, oh, okay, that's that's nice. Okay, so maybe that is where my origins are, and I just didn't remember. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I think we all have lots of memories, and I I think that the more we think about ourselves and our lives in a positive way, the more we do self analysis and introspection. I think that's a very important thing. I talk to people a lot about listening to their inner voice,
Mhm.
and in my newest book, "Live Like a Guide Dog," which is subtitled "True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs About Being Brave, Overcoming Adversity, and Moving Forward in Faith," the the idea is that in reality, when we listen to our inner voice and when we really work at thinking about what happens every day, we are developing our, as I call it, mind muscle. And the reality is that if we think about on any given day, if like before we go to sleep, we start to think about what happened today, what didn't work, what didn't work like we thought it would, what worked, and how could I make it better. But really taking the time to do that and then listening to our minds, which are always going to give us the right answer if we truly listen. The fact is that we will get what we need to know. And for me, one of the greatest and strongest examples of all of that is, for years I've done a lot of reading and I've done a lot of thinking, and I record every speech that I give. And when I listen to, well, not everyone, but most of them when I can, I will listen to them. And I always said to people, I'm my own worst critic. If I listen to the speech, I'm going to figure out what needs to be done if I listen to it objectively. But over the last couple of years, just because of things I've read and heard, I realized I'm approaching this all wrong. I'm not
Hmm.
my own worst critic, because one of the things that I've learned is no one can teach me anything. I'm the only one who can truly teach me something. People can present me with information, but I have to accept it. I have to absorb it. I have to teach it to me. And so what I've learned is I'm not my own worst critic. I'm my own best teacher. And I
Mm.
approach what I do with that as a concept. It's a much, as you can tell, it's a much more positive way of looking at it. It's
Mm.
a less threatening way, but it opens up so many opportunities and so many doors.
Wow, that is incredible. I really need to sit with that because I've given my inner critic a name. And I have tried to shift my perspective on my inner critic. When she's chirping loudly in my head, I shift it to she's driving me forward. She just doesn't have the right language to begin with. And so,
Well, she does. You're just not listening.
yeah, yeah. Huh.
because what I have found is that inner self observes everything and has absorbed anything that you've experienced. So they know the answers. And again, it's something I talk about a lot on Unstoppable Mindset. So I hope people don't get too bored of the example, but the game Trivial Pursuit. How many times do you play that game and somebody reads a question on a card and you immediately think of an answer and then you go, oh, that can't be the right answer. That's too easy. So you think about it and you choose a different answer. And it turns out that first answer was the correct answer all the time. We don't pay attention to our inner voice nearly as much as we should.
No, you're absolutely right about that. And we don't also, I think, this is just my opinion, we don't listen to our own bodies.
Yeah, part of the same thing, but you're right. We don't.
Yeah, we tend to ignore the signs.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, like, I know for myself, I have actual physical, outwardly signs that I should have been listening to. And sometimes I
Like
just sort of
like
push them.
what?
Like, sometimes I'll have, well, the one that comes to mind first is the upset stomach, but I
Mm,
also get like a tingling sensation at the top of my head sometimes, or a tingling in on the top right corner of my cheekbone. And I know now what those mean, but I didn't for a long time.
hmm.
So I just need to listen and embrace it and just move through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reality is your body will tell you when it's not happy with something, and you need to deal with that too.
Yes.
And the other part about it is there's so much in medical science. So sometimes you may not get any clue about something that's going on.
Mhm.
And so it's always good to take advantage of all the opportunities that medical science provides to be able to keep up with what's going on with your body.
Agreed. But these podcasts are so helpful because you can listen to so many different conversations, like I was saying before, and somebody will say something and you might resonate strongly with that. But you just,
Hmm.
it needed to have someone say it out loud in order for you to hear it.
Right. But then it's not only hearing it, but it's then paying attention to it and thinking about it and then doing something with it,
Yes. That's
which
why you
is
should
really
always
the issue.
carry paper and pen around. That's
Sorry?
why you should always carry paper and pen around to take
There
notes.
you go. Yeah. Um, a lot of good reasons for doing that.
Yeah.
So, what's a in a perfect world, what would your writer's life look like?
Oh, I think about that a lot more these days since I'm nearing retirement. But a perfect writer's life would be, waking up in the morning, reading for a while to fill that cup. No pun intended. I guess I would need a cup of coffee there as well. And then I would write, or actually, I would probably go for a run or a walk right after that to get things moving. And that is one of my channels for being creative. And then I would write for
Mm,
quite some time.
hmm.
My husband would cook me a meal. This is wishful thinking, right? So I'm allowed to dream here.
Yeah.
Um, and then I might write a little bit more in the afternoon, but we would then go out for a walk in the late afternoon and then just relax in the evening because I'm an early to bed kind of person.
Yeah. Me too. What time do you go to
Prefer
bed?
to be up. Oh gosh, 8:39. I prefer to be up at 5.
So I go to bed usually by 8,
Yeah.
if I can,
Yeah.
and I'm up at like 4:30
Oh,
because my wife was always a later riser, but I'm so used to being in environments where, like from the West Coast, I would be selling to the East Coast, that I needed to be able to take calls by 6 a.m. our time. But
okay.
now um, I just find it relaxing to get up and get dressed, take Alamo, the puppy dog, out and let him do his business. Actually, we have a fenced yard, so that works out.
Mm.
Feed the kitty cat, who insists on being petted while she eats most all the time. So, got to devote time to what you got to do. And then have my own breakfast. So, I usually don't get in the office now until around 6:30, unless then there are a couple of times that it happens. Somebody schedules a meeting really early in the day, which can be done. But
Mm.
I know what you're saying. And when I do that, and I get at least 8 hours of sleep, though, I am good for the whole day.
Yes, I agree. And I do love my sleep.
Yeah,
Do you find that those wee hours of the morning are just so peaceful?
yeah. And
That
I
everything,
think that's really important.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
You know, I don't spend a lot of time, well, thinking or worrying about things. If a thought comes up, a thought comes up, but I don't worry. It's a time to relax and be peaceful.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
after Alamo goes out, he comes in and he wants attention. So we sit on the floor and talk for a while. He's always happy with that.
Mhm.
And the kitty tolerates us both. So it works out.
Do you have
So,
to pet her at the same time?
and whenever she wants to eat, I have to definitely pet her. That's the usual time that she gets attention. And
Okay.
so, yeah, she definitely wants to be petted when she eats. And if I don't, she'll yell at
Yeah.
me until I
Oh,
do. Well, we're not happy if we're not getting the attention that we want.
she's not spoiled at all, is she, Mike?
No, dogs have masters and cats have staff, and that's all there is to it.
I like that.
Yeah, that's the way it is.
Mhm.
So does your husband cook?
Oh, yes. Yes, he
Okay.
does. We both cook. I tease because he keeps saying when he retires, which is before me, he'll prepare all the meals and I'll just have to work and he'll have my lunch ready and my supper ready. And I said, that sounds lovely. When are you retiring?
Yeah, hurry up. So is he still doing mining?
Yes. Yeah, he works in the mining industry and he's got another year. Our oldest son is still in school. He's in Michigan going to Ferris State for optometry.
Hmm.
And so, we just want to remain employed just in case he needs a little bit of help.
And or once you both retire, then you can talk to him about being supported in the manner that you want to become accustomed to because he's working.
That's right.
Yeah, got to deal with the important things. And what work do you do these days?
Well, I work in administration, but it's with the Correctional Service of Canada. It's here in Canada. That is our correctional with public safety.
Mm-hmm.
So I work on corporate reports and all the very exciting pieces of reports. I'll
Is
leave it at that. It's just not very entertaining or
is
exciting.
is that something you do remotely?
Yes,
Ah,
yes. It
so you
wasn't
get
always in this. I've
yeah.
changed jobs, a few times, but this is where I am right now.
But nowadays with computers and so on, so you do it from home.
Yes, I
Yeah,
do.
which
Yeah.
which is a good thing too. And I'm used to working from home or when I was in New York, I was in an office in the World Trade Center, and I had people who worked for me and so on. And I've had other jobs where I worked remotely, so sometimes it was from home and sometimes not. But um, it's also about developing a discipline because you've still got to get the work done, and no matter what your job is, you still got to do the work.
I think yeah, you read my mind there, Michael, because for me, when I had to, hunker down and get my um, Bachelor of Arts done in 2019, started in 2018, I needed discipline because I've worked
Mhm.
full time throughout the whole process, had kids, and so I needed to really focus. And I believe that helped me for these times because I do have the discipline. I have a separate space. I enjoy it, in fact, because my work has always been, I've always been surrounded with people, and I used to call myself the bartender because everybody would come to me and unload on me and I'd be like a vault. And now I get to focus on my work and get to shut the door. My goal was always to have my own window, my door, and bring my dog to work. Well, I've
Mm.
accomplished that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of dog?
So I have two mutts, as we call them, but we believe one is a boxer pointer. We're not quite sure. And the other one is a shepherd mix. So
Mm.
the two rescues.
That's cool.
Yeah, they're in their senior years now. That we think they're around 12.
Uh-huh.
They're, yeah.
Well, my guide dog Alamo will be 10 in May. And we rescued Stitch from some people who were going to take her to the pound. And we didn't
Mhm.
think we were going to keep her. We said we would find her a home
Mhm.
until I learned that her name was Stitch. And then I
Mhm.
knew that this cat was going nowhere because my wife has been a professional quilter ever since 1994. A
Wow.
quilter giving up a cat named Stitch ain't going to happen.
No, 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 no.
And Stitch is very happy with that.
Oh,
So,
that's nice. What kind of cat is it? Like what color or?
well, she looks like a calico cat, but people tell me she's a small Maine Coon cat.
Ooh,
She's
interesting.
not that very large though. She's only about 10, 11 pounds, but
Okay.
lots of personality, which is fine.
Yes.
So tell us about your first book that you wrote. How long did it take? And just tell us all about that.
So I would say 3 solid, full, packed years it took me from beginning to now. Um, like I said, it started out with my dogs and kind of gifting me with this story because I've always had dogs, but these two in particular have their own set of issues, anxieties, fears, and I've always tried to fix them. And so over the years, I've tried so many different things like dog behaviorists, obedience classes, dog parks, no dog parks, socializing, all of it. And it just, they're great dogs and I love them, but one is much more assertive than the other. So we got the other one to keep the first one company. Oh my goodness, so many things. And that day when Sully came bounding towards me and sort of said to me, like, I'm okay. You don't need to change me or fix me. Just accept me and just the way I've accepted you. And that's when it started for me. So, like, I started writing more and more, more scenes, more chapters until I had this full story, which started out as my story. But then I thought, well, I could have some fun with this. I could give Sully a voice so he could tell people his story. And that's when I created a protagonist who was younger than me. She has a lot of my traits, of course, but she is her own character now. But the two dogs in the story are Cash and Sully, and they are my dogs. So everything that happens to them, it did happen in real life.
Hmm. How'd you come
Yeah.
up with the two names for the dogs?
So that was a sign for me, for Cash, that is, when I went to the pound and he told me his name and he said his name was Cash. And I
Hmm.
said, well, I don't want a dog with a gangster name like Cash. He said, no, 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 it's Johnny Cash. And that was it. He had
Ah,
me at Johnny Cash. Sully came with a different name. It was Rugger. And I just find that name so difficult to roll off the tongue.
yeah.
And so my husband named him Sullivan. Yep.
Ah,
Mhm.
and so it's Sully for short.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Sullivan when we mean business, like
Yeah,
T.
yeah, yeah. I understand.
Mhm.
Like parents the world over use the long version of a child's name when they're trying to really get the child's attention.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Except when
what's your
you're Holly and there's no long or short form.
they don't
But
call you Hal for short or anything
no,
like that? Okay.
no,
Well, but then it's how you say it. It's Holly as opposed to Holly.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
They still have ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's your second book about
My second book is
that you're
going to
starting
be,
to work on?
yes, it's a sweet romance and it's a meet cute that takes place in the dog park. So there will be a lot of dogs in this story as well. But my hope with this book is there's been a history of, the guy rescues the girl all the time in these romance stories. And there will be some of that. Like he will come to her rescue at times, but there will be a momentous event where she will have to rescue him.
That's fair.
Mhm. Yeah,
It goes both ways.
that's right.
So what do you want readers to take away from the works that you write?
Well, for this book in particular, North of Broken and Forever Home, I started out as a way to get to know my dogs, even though I had already had them for over 10 years, but I was trying
Hmm.
to find a different way to understand what was going on. And what I thought was, that sticker, that bumper sticker, who rescued who, turned out to be more of a story of acceptance. And so I needed to realize that once I accepted them for, their personalities, their issues, then we could move into a different part of our relationship because they accepted me from day one with all
Hmm.
of my, Holly isms and quirks, and so it was only fair that I did the same. Now, that being said, like, they're dogs, and I'm a responsible dog owner, and they had behavioral issues, but we always made sure that people were safe or they were safe. And so I don't want this to be interpreted like I just let them get away with things. No,
Yeah.
it was more of the way that I needed to accept who they were and sort of, you know, move in line with that instead of fighting it all the time. So, what I'm asking readers to take away, well, first, I'm asking them to put aside their judgment because there's a talking dog. But second is just, accept what you cannot change and work with it.
Well, you said that you did a lot of different things like obedience training and animal behavior, and obviously you worked with, I would assume, professionals in a lot of that. What did you learn from all of that?
Hmm. Well, I did learn how to behave around a dog and how
Mm-hmm.
to observe the dog, looking for key signs, their eyes, their ears, their tail, their body language, something I never really paid attention to before because the dogs I've always had never really had these types of issues. And so it taught me how to almost be a step ahead of them in the sense that, like, if we were going for a walk, well, maybe I needed to just shift my body weight or be a little bit more assertive in my stance. So it was just learning how to take notice and to read my dogs instead of reacting.
For a number of years, we lived in Northern California in a town called Novato. And just down the street, well, about a mile, not quite a mile away, was the Marin Humane Society, which is one of the foremost organizations of its kind in this country. And we were over visiting and talking with people one day. And one of the things that they said was that in reality, when people bring their dogs in to say, we need this dog trained and so on, 90% of the training is human and only about 10% is really the dog, which
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense given the way people typically view dogs and so on.
That's
And
right.
they don't accept them for what they are nearly as much as they should, which doesn't mean that dogs shouldn't behave and so on. And the reality is that dogs want to behave, they want to know what you want the rules to be, but you have to learn how to set the rules and set the expectations and develop that trusting relationship.
I agree with that. And I think that dogs know how to behave with one another, but we are asking them to shift to the way we live.
Yeah,
And so naturally, there's going to be some behaviors there and
yeah.
some changes. So I agree. It's training
Well,
the human.
yeah, and the reality is you can get them to accept a lot of the things that we want and do, but there's a way to do that. And that's what people don't do. Well, if you have a choice, do you want to live spend a week on the beach reading or in a cabin writing off in the wilderness somewhere?
Definitely the second. I
Yeah,
would,
I thought
oh
so.
gosh, cabin in the woods. I'll even take it in the winter with snow. Put me
Sure.
beside a wood stove and peace, nature, birds, animals, any day. I'm not a heat worshiper, and I suppose it comes with who I am. I was born in Northern Ontario and lived in Northern Canada, so it's part of my DNA now.
We need to learn collectively as humans that there's nothing wrong with quiet and silence time and that communing with ourselves is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Definitely, and that's why I look forward to some of those long drives now too.
there you are. Who's someone that you looked up to?
Hmm. That is, gosh, it's not that I'm drawing a blank. It's just that, there are a lot of people that have guided me along the way, and I'm trying to pinpoint, but I would say recently I have a friend now. We've become very good friends, and I feel like she gave me the permission. This may come across not the right way, but what I'm trying to say is one day she looked at me and she said, I was questioning whether I could write, and I called myself a writer from the heart, and I didn't believe I belonged. And she said, well, I think you're already a writer. And it was like a switch just flipped on. And it's like she gave me permission to really step into that label,
Mm.
that, those shoes. And I feel like it was always meant for me, but I didn't believe in myself enough to do it. And so I really looked up to her. I look up to her. She took me under her wing and she taught me a lot about the craft of writing. And now we've become such good friends. And yeah, at this point, but there are many people who have guided me along the way. But I would say recently, a strong woman who who stands it well in her own feet. And
Hmm.
yeah, has really helped me through this part of my journey.
If somebody came up to you and said, I just feel stuck. I can't create. I don't know how to create, or I want to write and I'm having a hard time doing it. What kind of advice would you give them?
I would say immediately, just how about we go for a walk in the woods? Because for me, that helps. It doesn't even have to be the woods. It could be wherever you are, right? But I think that if you're, I'm a I'm a lover of trees, and so I feel like when you surround yourself with the things that you love or that give you strength or peace, the ideas will come. But you just need to quiet your mind long enough for the thoughts to filter into those spaces of your mind
There you go.
because it's filled with so much stuff. So you have to almost like work off that excess energy. So I say move your body.
So you are involved in some local writers organizations and so on, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And so on. So if somebody wants to reach out to you and talk about writing and talk about what you do and learn from you, how can they reach out to you? What's the best ways to do that?
I'm on a lot of the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and I do have a website, Ramblings from the Little Shed. And you can email me. I would love to give back what was given to me. And so I would love to support other writers in their journey in the beginning. Not to say that I have all the answers, I certainly don't, but I'm not afraid to ask questions.
Mhm.
And I think that talking it out with people, sometimes it's even just bantering back and forth about a story idea.
There
And
you
you'd be
go.
amazed at what can come out from a good old conversation if you tune in.
So is it ramblingsfromthelittleshed.com?
Yes, that's correct.
.com. Okay. And if people find you on social media, how do they do that? What do they look for?
Ramblings from the Little Shed.
Okay.
Yeah. And I try to keep it fairly steady across the board.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, Holly, I want to thank you for being with us today. This has been fun. And I want to thank all of you who are out there for tuning in today and being with us. We appreciate it. Wherever you are, I'd love it if you'd give us a review on the podcast. Talk about hopefully all good things. We'd appreciate a review because people who are exploring listening to podcasts check those reviews out. Certainly, if you'd like to reach out to me, I'd love to hear from you. It's easy. It's speaker, SPEAKER, at Michael Hingson, MICHAELHINGSON.com. And if you know anyone who you think ought to be a guest on our podcast, Holly, including you, we'd sure love to hear from you. We'll introduce us to them and we'll go from there because as I said, I believe everyone has a story to tell. But again, Holly, I want to thank you for being here. This has been absolutely fun.
It has been amazing. And I can't believe our time is over. It's like we just started chatting. So that says a lot about how comfortable this is. So thank you, Michael. I really appreciate